Rideshare apps like Lyft and Uber have become part of our daily lives. But behind the convenience, there are stories. Stories that drivers rarely talk about. Stories that passengers never forget. And some stories that go far beyond the explainable. These are 3 true Lyft horror stories, submitted by real drivers and retold here, exactly as they happened. Back in late 2020, just as the world was slowly crawling out of lockdown, I picked up a side hustle driving for Lyft. I just lost my job at a small tech startup that couldn't survive the pandemic. At the time, I thought Lyft was the best option. Flexible hours, quick cash, and the chance to meet all kinds of people. But I learned the hard way that not all passengers are just people trying to get from one place to another. There are nights that stay with you forever. Nights you think about in the shower, in bed, driving alone. Nights that make you question if what happened was even real, or if you were supposed to survive at all. This was one of those nights. It was a Friday, sometime in mid-November, cold enough to see your breath at night, but not quite snow season yet. I was driving the late shift, as usual, anywhere between 9 p.m. to 3 a.m. You get fewer rides during those hours, but better tips, less traffic, and, usually, drunk but harmless passengers. It was around 1:15 a.m. when I dropped off a woman in the warehouse district on the east side of town. She was polite, a little tipsy, nothing weird. As I was pulling away, the Lyft app dinged again. A ride request popped up. Pickup location just 6 minutes away. The name on the request said, Donovan. I accepted and drove over. The pin led me to a long stretch of road that borders a semi-abandoned industrial park. It's the kind of place where half the buildings are shuttered. The rest only have one flickering light out front. A spot you'd expect to see in a crime documentary. I pulled up next to a small parking lot outside what used to be a metal fabrication shop. There was only one person in sight, a tall man standing under one of the busted streetlights. He had on a dark navy trench coat and what looked like dress shoes, hands in his pockets, face shadowed by the brim of a fedora or wide hat. I rolled down the window. "You Donovan?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. He tilted his head toward me and gave the faintest nod. Then he walked slowly around the front of the car and got into the back seat. Now, I've had quiet riders before. Some people just don't want to talk. But this guy made the whole air in the car feel wrong. Cold. Still. Like everything outside of the vehicle had gone quiet too. I asked him if the address on the app was correct. Somewhere on the outskirts of a rural subdivision about 25 minutes out of town. He simply replied, "Yes." One word. Flat. Emotionless. We pulled away, and he didn't say another word. About 5 minutes into the trip, I tried to make small talk. Something casual, like, "Long night?" He replied after a pause. "Longer than yours." His voice was gravelly, but quiet. No accent, no emotion. That response stuck with me. Like it wasn't an answer to be polite. More like a warning. I laughed awkwardly and said, "Fair enough." And then the silence returned. He didn't fidget, didn't use his phone, didn't even look out the window, just stared straight ahead, like he was watching something I couldn't see. I checked the mirror a few times. His eyes were open wide, fixed, not blinking often. Every once in a while, he'd lick his lips, slow and deliberate, like he was tasting something on the air. Around 20 minutes into the ride, we passed the last gas station before the neighborhood we were heading to. That area is mostly woods and farmland, with barely any streetlights. Not many people live out there. At least, not the kind of people you usually pick up on a Lyft ride. Just as I'm about to make the final turn down the road listed on the app, the guy suddenly leans forward and whispers, "This isn't the place. Keep going." I freeze a little. I say, "What do you mean?" "This is the address in the app." He whispers again, closer this time. "It changed. Keep going. You'll see." Now, Lyft drivers can get in trouble for not following app directions, especially if the ride doesn't match the destination. So I was torn. Do I obey this creepy whispering man, or do I follow the GPS? I tried to sound calm and said, "I really need you to update the app if you want to change the drop-off point." His hand suddenly reached between the seats, not to grab me, but to point. "Take the next left, then right. You'll see." Against my better judgment, I did it. Maybe I was scared. Maybe I just wanted him out of the car as fast as possible. We pulled onto a narrow road. No signs, no houses, just trees. Branches were overhanging like claws above us. The headlights barely cut through the blackness. I slowed to a crawl. He suddenly said, "There." I looked to my right and saw an old, sagging gate wide open, like it hadn't been shut in years. Beyond it was a dirt path leading to what looked like an ancient house, barely visible through the trees. I said, "Is this your place?" He didn't answer, just opened the door and stepped out. No thank you, no goodbye. Just walked toward the house and disappeared into the shadows. I sat there for a second, watching the trees. The ride hadn't ended. The app still showed the trip as active. I debated hitting end ride and driving off. That's when my phone lit up. New message from Ryder. "Don't leave." I stared at it. My stomach dropped. I didn't text back. I didn't move. I just waited. A minute passed. Then another. Then I saw movement in the trees. He wasn't walking back. He was crawling on all fours like a predator, slowly making his way back to the car. Eyes wide, mouth open in a silent grin. I lost it. I slammed the car into reverse, kicked up gravel and dirt, and peeled out of there. The last thing I saw in the mirror was him standing up suddenly and sprinting after me before vanishing into the darkness. I drove until I was back on the main road, parked under a streetlight at that gas station we passed earlier, hands shaking, breathing like I'd just run a marathon. I opened the Lyft app. The ride was still active, but the passenger info was gone. No name, no picture, no trip history. It was like the whole ride had never existed. I contacted Lyft support. They said sometimes the app glitches. Sometimes riders delete their accounts mid-trip. But I know what I saw. I know where I went. I know who was in my car. I filed a police report, but there was nothing they could do. I didn't have a license plate. I didn't even have an official trip record. And that place, the house? I went back during the day with a friend a week later. There was no house, just a collapsed foundation and burnt beams. like it had burned down years ago. So who did I drop off? I haven't driven at night since. Back in 2021, when everything was still slightly off kilter from the pandemic, I started driving for Lyft. I had recently moved to a mid-sized city in Arizona, and while I worked part-time at a hardware store during the day, I used the Lyft gig to cover bills at night. It gave me flexibility and paid just enough to keep the lights on. I mostly worked evenings, sometimes going until 2 or 3 a.m. depending on demand. The thing about driving late-night ride shares is you encounter all types: drunk frat guys, oversharing boomers, flirty divorcees, you name it. But then there are some rides you never forget. The ones that get stuck in your head, haunting you quietly every time you glance in the rearview mirror. This is one of those stories. It was a Friday night in October. I remember because there was a chill in the air. Not enough for a coat, but the kind of night where your breath starts to show a little if you exhale hard. I had just dropped off a couple outside a karaoke bar downtown. They were your typical happy-go-lucky types, singing as they stumbled out of my car. I chuckled and was about to head home when the app pinged. Pickup location: Desert Ridge Lanes Bowling Alley. Name: Derek. The place was only about 7 minutes away, nestled in a half-dead strip mall on the edge of the city limits. I'd been there a few times before, mostly to pick up workers from the bar attached to the alley. The whole area was dimly lit, with one flickering sign above the bowling alley that read "Open," even though it was very much not. When I pulled into the lot, it was mostly empty, save for a few abandoned shopping carts and a trash bin tipped over near the corner. Then I saw him. A man stood under one of the only working parking lot lights. He was tall, maybe 6'2", and wearing a gray hoodie with the hood up and jeans. His hands were in his pockets, head tilted slightly downward like he was examining his shoes. The weirdest part? He didn't move when I approached. Didn't wave. Didn't even check his phone. Just stood there. I rolled my window down and asked, "You Derek?" He didn't speak at first. Just gave a slight nod, turned, and walked slowly toward my back passenger door. He got in without a word and buckled up. That alone made me uneasy. Most riders either mumble a greeting or at least acknowledge me. But this guy, nothing. I glanced at him in the mirror. "Destination good as is?" I asked, looking at the app. He nodded and finally spoke. "Yeah, that's right." His voice was low, emotionless. It wasn't slurred or anything, just flat. No personality behind it. Like he was reading from a script but didn't care about the role. I figured maybe he was having a bad night. Maybe he'd just gotten dumped or fired. I started driving. For the next 5 or 6 minutes, we sat in complete silence. I glanced at him a couple of times in the mirror, and every time I did, I caught him staring, not out the window, not at his phone, but at the back of my head. That's when the uneasiness kicked in full force. I tried to play it cool. "How's your night going?" I asked, trying to break the tension. A pause. Then, "Just needed to get out of there." "Out of where?" I asked without thinking. He turned his head slightly, just enough for me to catch the outline of his face. "Doesn't matter." I didn't say another word. About 15 minutes into the ride, I realized we were heading into one of the more isolated parts of town. The GPS was guiding me into a neighborhood I didn't recognize, with no streetlights, huge yards, and lots of overgrown trees. Some of the houses looked like they hadn't been lived in for years. The kind of place where people wouldn't hear you scream. I was about a block from the destination when he leaned forward, his voice suddenly more alert. "Actually, can you pull into that driveway there?" He pointed at a house on the right. It was an older place with chipped paint, no lights, and an overgrown lawn. The windows were dark, no porch light, no car in the driveway. "Is this your place?" I asked, tapping the brakes. "Just pull in," he said. Something in me hesitated. I didn't want to. Every gut instinct was screaming don't. but he was in my car, and I didn't want to risk escalating things. So I pulled into the driveway and put the car in park, my foot still hovering over the brake. He didn't move, just sat there, staring at the house. Then finally he said, "Wait here." He got out, walked toward the house, but instead of going to the front door, he turned and disappeared around the side. I sat there, engine still on, debating whether I should stay or leave. 2 minutes passed, then 3. I didn't see any lights come on, didn't hear a door open or shut. I decided I wasn't sticking around. I manually ended the ride in the app and shifted into reverse. That's when I saw him. He was walking fast toward the car from the shadows around the back of the house. His hands were empty, but his eyes, they looked different, like he was excited or angry. I couldn't tell. I unlocked the doors instinctively, not wanting to cause a scene. He got in, leaned forward again, and said, "Take me to the other place." I asked what he meant, but he just replied, "Just drive. I'll tell you, I can't take you anywhere unless you put it in the app," I said firmly. He didn't move, didn't blink, just stared at me through the mirror again. A beat of silence. Then he said, "Take me back to where you picked me up." I started driving back to the strip mall. That entire ride, he said nothing, just stared. The silence was deafening. At one point, trying to ease the tension, I said, "Rough night, huh?" He responded, "You could say that." I chuckled nervously and asked if everything was okay. "Not yet," he said. That was it. No explanation, no elaboration. When we arrived back at the bowling alley, I pulled up to the same light where he'd first gotten in. He didn't get out right away. Instead, he leaned forward and asked, "You ever wonder how you're going to die?" I laughed awkwardly, brushing it off. Not really something I think about. He didn't smile, didn't even blink. He just leaned back into his seat again and muttered, "I think about it all the time." He opened the door slowly, but didn't get out right away. Half in, half out, he looked back at me and said, "You picked the wrong guy up tonight." Then he stepped out and vanished behind the alley. I sat there for a good minute, too shaken to drive. When I finally got home, I pulled up the app to review the trip. But something was off. The name Derek was gone. No profile picture. No ride history. Just a blank rider profile like the trip never happened. I contacted Lyft support, but they said no trip details were available. They blamed a potential app crash or cancellation. But I know what happened. I know he was there. I know I drove him. I know what he said. And every time I see a ping from a dark parking lot late at night, I still hesitate. Because I keep thinking, what if I really did pick up the wrong guy that night? And what if he's still out there, waiting for someone else to pull up under that same flickering light? This happened in 2022, and I haven't driven for Lyft since. Not because I had a bad rating or a bad accident. It was something harder to explain. At the time, I was working nights at a warehouse and doing Lyft rides on weekends for extra money. I'm not the type to scare easy. I've done all-nighters, driven in storms, dealt with fights in my back seat. I've even driven blackout drunk college kids who puked down the window cracks. Nothing really fazed me until I met her. It was a Saturday night in December, around 11:45 p.m. I was about to call it after one last ride. I just dropped someone off near an industrial district outside Dallas when I got a ping from a user named Marla. No profile picture, no ride history, no reviews. But whatever, I wasn't picky. The pickup location was strange. An abandoned gas station off the frontage road of I-20. The kind of place with boards on the windows, weeds growing through the cracks in the pavement, and an old rusted air machine half eaten by time. Still, I figured maybe her car broke down nearby. People get stranded all the time. So I pulled in, headlights sweeping across the crumbling lot. That's when I saw her. She was standing near one of the old pumps, arms at her sides, wearing what looked like a black coat or shawl. long and heavy, reaching her ankles. Her head was tilted slightly, like she was straining to listen to something I couldn't hear. I couldn't see her face yet, but she raised her hand as I pulled up. I rolled the passenger window down. "Lift for Marla?" She nodded once, slowly, then got into the back seat directly behind me. The door didn't slam. It clicked, like someone closing a safe. "Cold night," I said, trying to be friendly. She didn't respond. As I started to pull out, I asked, "Where we headed?" The app didn't show a destination, just said, "Destination, to be entered by rider." After a few moments, she said quietly, "Just drive. I'll tell you." Normally, I don't move without an address, but something about her voice. It was calm, slow, but not slurred, like someone talking through a dream. Not threatening, but not right either. Against my better judgment, I started driving. "Which direction?" I asked. She simply said, "East." So I got back on the service road heading east. As we drove, I couldn't help glancing at her in the rearview. I still couldn't make out much of her face. It was mostly in shadow, and she seemed to sit unusually straight. Her coat looked more like a robe, now that I was closer. Heavy fabric, like wool, but too smooth, like it hadn't aged even a day. 10 minutes went by. Then she spoke again. "You shouldn't have taken this ride, Cam." That stopped me cold. "Wait, how do you know my name?" I asked. She didn't respond. I glanced at the app. No profile picture, no details, nothing that would show my name to a passenger. I hadn't told her my name, and the only way she could have known was if she'd been in my car before. But I knew she hadn't. "What did you say?" I asked again. She leaned forward, just enough for me to see her face in the mirror. Pale, eyes almost colorless, lips too red, like they'd been drawn on. "I said," she whispered, "you shouldn't have come here." I hit the brakes, pulling to the side of the road near a dimly lit rest area. "Okay, I don't know what this is, but the ride's over," I said. "You can get out here." She didn't move, just stared at me in the mirror. "You don't get it," she said softly. "You've already been here before." Something about the way she said that, it hit a nerve. I didn't know why, but my whole body went cold. I started to reach for my phone to call support or somebody when I noticed something. The rear seat was empty. My eyes darted up to the mirror. Still empty, but the door behind me was closed. I hadn't heard it open, hadn't felt her move. And then, the whisper again. But this time, right in my ear. "You should have turned around the first time." I jumped out of the car so fast I scraped my arm against the doorframe. Stumbled back, heart pounding, staring into the empty back seat. Nothing. I checked around the car, under it, behind the pump where I picked her up. No one. No footprints. Nothing but the chill of the December wind. I never got another ping from Marla. In fact, when I looked into my ride history, there was no record of that trip. Nothing after 11:30. My app had zero data past the previous rider. I deleted the Lyft app that night and never opened it again. I still don't know who or what she was. But sometimes when I drive late at night just for errands or to clear my head, I pass old gas stations. And once in a while, I see a woman standing under the light, arms at her sides, waiting to be picked up. I don't stop anymore. Some rides never end. Some passengers never existed. And sometimes, the scariest stories don't come from movies. They come from real people, doing real jobs, just trying to make it through the night. If you like these stories, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more true horror.